Wheel. Hey, I'm Brian. Welcome to the Daily Brew Garage. So we're back on the Jeep project a little bit today, but we're, as usual, sidetracked from the beginning because it's been sitting for a while and the battery is dead. So I need to jump start the Jeep in order to get it in the garage to work on it. I thought this would be a great opportunity to create a quick video on how to properly jump start a car so that you don't injure yourself or damage one or both of the vehicles. There are basically three types of people: those who know how to jumpstart correctly, those who think they know how to jumpstart correctly, and those who don't know how to jumpstart. There's no shame really in any of that, other than if you're the one who thinks you know how to jumpstart a vehicle but you don't know exactly. You can damage the computer system, you can damage electronic components. This particular Jeep is old enough that it has very, very little in the way of electronics to get damaged, but I'm still going to follow the proper process, the proper sequence to connect and disconnect the jumper cables from the dead vehicle to the donor vehicle and vice versa, and then also where to connect those. Before we do that, I'm going to take a quick look with a multimeter at the status of this battery and see where it is right now, and kind of go over real quickly how, if you have a multimeter, how you can check the current status of your battery just to see how dead it is. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is make sure that our multimeter is turned on and set to the proper setting in order to test a car battery, which is DC. Then we want to use the DC voltage setting, which is going to be right here. You want to look for the V with the solid line and the three dots. This is a 12 volt battery, so I want to be sure that I'm set higher than 12 volts, so I'm going to set at 20 on the multimeter. So 20 volts DC is where I want my multimeter to be set. So what I want to do is I want to identify the positive and negative terminals on the battery. Positive terminal, the cable should be red. It may not always be red, so you want to also look for the plus sign on the battery or any indication that this is the positive terminal. The negative terminal should be black. That's not necessarily going to be the case, but the battery itself should be marked with a minus sign. So I'm going to touch the negative lead on my multimeter to the negative terminal on the battery. Nothing happens, and I'm going to touch the red lead on the multimeter to the positive, and we're reading roughly 3.7 volts, which is nowhere near the 12 volts that this battery should be registering. So obviously it's depleted, not 100% dead, but that's way beyond where it would even try to start the car. Typically if they get down below about 10 volts or so, you can bet that you're going to have trouble. So we will go ahead and walk through hooking up the jumper cables and see if we can't get it started. Okay, I have positioned my donor vehicle, or my working vehicle, in the right position to get to the battery on the dead vehicle. You want to make sure that typically your jumper cables are going to be 8, 10, 12 feet, something like that. Make sure your vehicles are close enough that you can get the cables comfortably there without stretching them, but you want to make sure that the vehicles are not touching. I do want to pause real quick to say that this procedure is fairly vehicle agnostic. It should work in most cases. However, if you drive a fully electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, or any kind of a high-end supercar, any exotic vehicle, please disregard this information as it may not apply to your car. So this is just for a standard combustion engine vehicle, single battery, regular gas burning engine. I don't want you to assume that the way you jump these a regular or a normal vehicle off is going to be the same, because I honestly don't know. When it comes to hybrid or electric vehicles, I'm not sure what the procedure may be. I'm going to assume it's different, and there are probably a lot more things to consider, especially when it comes to computers and electronics and being able to get the vehicle going without damaging anything. So, disclaimer, this does not apply if you drive a fully electric or a hybrid vehicle or some kind of exotic European high-end supercar, sports car, or something like that. Now we'll get back to it. I do prefer to before I connect jumper cables to a battery, I do like to do a quick inspection just to make sure there's nothing wrong with either battery or the connections, any of that, right? So if the battery terminals themselves look extremely corroded with a bunch of white powdery oxidation on it, or whatever they call that, just you want to be sure that everything is in good working order before you start connecting up the battery. And this one in too bad a shape. Positive terminal's a little wonky. I still have to determine what exactly these extra battery or these extra wires are that are connected to my positive post. I'm assuming one of them is the light bar, and I don't know what the other one may be. We're going to leave them be for the moment. Maybe part of the reason my battery's dead. So I also want to quickly inspect the jumper cables that I'm using, whether they're mine or if they're someone else's. I want to just check and make sure that they are in proper working order. They're untangled, and see, I want to make sure they're untangled. There's nothing loose or broken or just strange or odd looking about the clamps themselves. The cables don't have any frays, no openings in them. I want to check both ends. If I've stored these properly, which is in their jumper cable bag, then they should be in good shape, but it's always good to check and make sure. So these are in good shape, so I'm okay to go ahead and use them. The proper process for connecting a dead battery to a live battery in order to jump the dead battery, it's actually fairly simple. You start with the positive terminal on the dead battery. That's step one. Step two is the positive terminal on the working battery. Step three is the negative terminal on the working battery. Step four is a frame, something that is grounded to the frame of the dead vehicle, motor mount, shock mount, something that is grounded to the frame of the vehicle, not the negative post on the dead battery. You don't ever want to connect to that. So the way I think of it is, you start with dead red, right? The red or the positive terminal on the dead battery. Start with dead red and then work in a circle. Dead red, live black, ground on the dead battery. So we'll walk through those one at a time. So beginning with a connection on the dead battery, clamp that. I really want to make sure that it's going to connect in some way that it's not going to slip off. That's what I prefer. That looks pretty solid. The other important factor is I don't ever want these leads, once I connect them to a battery, I don't ever want them to touch each other. So this is the good battery, so I'm going to connect this guy. And then this is the negative on the good battery. So those are good. And I'm going to pull just a little bit of slack up here and store it up so that it won't put pressure pulling on those cables, so they'll stay in a good position. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually connect the black to, not to the negative terminal on the battery, but to this bolt, which is bolted into the fender, which is hooked to the frame. So I can actually connect this to that guy right there. A little bit small, but it's going to be okay. As long as he stays clamped, I'm good. One thing I forgot to mention, but I think you figured it out by now, both vehicles should be off when you're making these connections. Prior to starting the vehicles, you want to make sure everything's turned off, air conditioning and radio and all that, just to minimize the load on the battery. We'll start the live vehicle, the working vehicle, get the RPMs up, let it run for a minute, and then we'll start the dead vehicle. And it looks like it's registering 13.8, which is about what I would expect for a good battery. So we will get in now and start the dead vehicle and see if we can get it running. So here's an interesting situation. It took the battery up to 12 volts, which I was expecting. I tried to crank it one time and immediately it drained this battery. I've tested the running vehicle and its battery is running at 14 volts, which is what you expect on a vehicle while it's running, while the alternator is charging it. But now as I look at this, when I test this battery again, it is registering it won't hold a charge. It's ranging between 6 and 8 volts. So even with the alternator from the truck pushing a charge to it, it's just not charging really very quickly at all. So that tells me that this battery is just dead. So I need to take it up and replace it. Okay, so now we know the battery is completely dead to the point that it's not going to be rechargeable, which was kind of my fear, and that's okay. It's still under the 3-year warranty, so I'll take it up and get that replaced. In order to disconnect the cables, even if it had worked, if the battery was not completely shot, the dead vehicle would be running at this point. So disconnecting the cables is the exact reverse order that you connected it, right? So I want to disconnect the black from the dead vehicle. Disconnect the black from the working vehicle. The red from the working vehicle. And then finally, the red from the dead vehicle. So there we go. That's how to properly connect jumper cables and jump start a vehicle, and or determine if your battery is dead to the point that it cannot be jump started. So the other battery was still under warranty. I guess I bought it with a 3-year warranty, I'm not sure. Anyway, it was still under warranty because I just bought it about a year ago. So I went ahead and ran up. I decided to go ahead and do two things: replace the battery so I can get the Jeep running, but I also need to I want to figure out where the drain is coming from that's draining the battery. I'm fairly positive it's the light bar, so I'm just gonna get the battery installed and then see if I can track that down real quick so that I don't have to go through this a second time. This Jeep lost its battery retaining strap sometime long before it got in my possession, so I have temporarily thrown together these little ties just to keep the battery from sliding around too much while I'm driving. That's another thing that'll be getting fixed on this Jeep. Okay, so we're going to put a little gel on our posts. Just a little. Not a lot. Try to keep the corrosion down as best we can. Of course, I came out here without a rag, so it's all right. This is probably going to the nuts on these posts are in pretty bad shape. I don't know what size they are. They're fairly rounded off. I think they should be either 10 or 11 millimeter, but I can't get anything to fit on them. So we use the improper tool to get them as tight as we can. That'll work. Now, I need to trace this down before I tighten it down. Oh, maybe I don't. I don't know what that is. It's either that wire or that wire. I'm going to check inside. Let's see. Yeah, I was correct. It's this pitiful little excuse for a connection that is the hot wire for the light bar. So now the light bar doesn't work, and I don't care because it's coming off. So I need to get rid of that yet, but I need to secure that up where it won't short anything out. So that's good for the moment. We'll go ahead and tighten this guy up, and then see if we can get the Jeep started. I'm looking for input on a name for the Jeep. I think eventually I'm going to name it something. It is a 1988 Wrangler Laredo, technically. I think the Laredo had chrome, whereas the base model, whatever it was called in the YJ, the Laredo had, I think, a chrome grille and color matched fenders, or I'm not sure. Anyway, so I may just call it a Laredo. That may be cool. Take it back a little bit old school. I've modified my original plan a little bit from what I originally wanted to do, was more or less a restore. I think I'm going to go a little bit more exotic than just a restoration. I don't know. We'll see. All right, we'll see if it'll start. while I was gone getting the new battery for the Jeep, the FedEx man brought me a package. I think I know what this is. So you guys be sure and check back next week for a video about this, whatever it is. Stick around. Thanks. See ya.